that calculates people's heights. Do you think he wants to calculate a dog's height?
I'm going to be basing my calculations off this study, which essentially just states that dogs are proportional creatures because of their similar skeletal system as humans. First, I needed a reference for his leg size. A standard toilet paper roll has a diameter of about 4.5 inches. Assuming from the ground to his shoulder and from the shoulder to the top of his body follow a 1-to-1 ratio, all we need to do now is find his head size. For that, I'm going to be using this Puppuccino. Since the cup wasn't covered in Starbucks branding, I'm assuming that it was a homemade Puppuccino used in a 5-ounce Dixie bath cup. I couldn't find the exact design, but the top diameter and the height were both 2 5/8 inches. The dog's head didn't fully fit in the cup because of the dome shape, so I'm going to be adding a 1/2 inch to the diameter. I couldn't find a good side profile, but I'm essentially going to be using these measurements to find his width and body height. First, multiply the height of the leg by 2 since the leg and the body are 1-to-1. Then add 3 1/8 to get a standing height of 12 1/8 inches and a width of 12.5 inches.
Well, now I wanted to guess my height.
For this video, I decided to calculate her height using this photo of her holding cheese. The cheese does have equal side lengths of 3.25 inches, so I was able to set up a 45-45-90 triangle to get the hypotenuse, and I'm estimating that blue line to be about 25% of that distance. Per request, I decided to go with multiple references for her chest size, one being this G Fuel cup, which I'm using for her shoulders. I found this G Fuel shaker from a similar line of cups, which had a top diameter of 4 inches. For the rest of her chest size, I'm going to be using her clout goggles. This you? If those glasses are correct, then they have a frame width of 5.71 inches. Now we can set up our equation. First, multiply 3.25 by square root 2. Multiply that number by 1.25 to cover the missing distance. Multiply that number by 1.618 to get her forearm size. Multiply that number by 2. Add the y value back on. Multiply by 2 again to count for both arms. Multiply the top diameter of the G Fuel cup by 2 and add 5.71 to get her chest size. And add that number to the arm lengths to get 62.38 inches, or about 5'2" and 3/8 inches.
This is my official request for that guy that figures out people's heights on TikTok. Please do Louis Tomlinson.
I decided to find his height using this photo of him holding a microphone. I had to do a bit of research on microphones, and since he was a lead singer, I was looking for a large diaphragm dynamic handheld or wireless microphone. After cycling through many pictures of him holding different microphones and watching many of his live performances on YouTube, I was able to determine that his main mic was the Shure KSM9, which had a consistent diameter of 2 inches. I decided to go with this cover of walls for his chest reference. This you? Assuming the chair was correct, it has a total width of 22 inches, and I'm estimating there to be a 3-inch gap between the metal and the wood slab. Now we can set up our equation using 2 pi per y since the hand was equivalent to the circumference of the mic. First, do 2 times pi per hand size, multiply that number by 1.618, multiply that number by 2, add the hand size back on, multiply by 2 to account for both arms, and add 16 for chest size to be left with 69.23 inches, or a wingspan of about 5'9" and 1/4 inches.
Only have one height. See, that's what makes this difficult. I'm built different.
So first I have to learn a bit more about his condition, and the reason for his disproportionate growth is due to something called enchondromas, which are essentially just bone tumors that start in his cartilage. Meaning I can still get his height by finding his true wingspan. To do that, I'm going to be using this 20-ounce Yeti tumbler. I'm estimating this hand size to be half the circumference of the Yeti cup, which has a top diameter of 3.5 inches. Next, I'm going to be using this photo of him in this chair as a chest reference. This you, but black because rail was out of stock. If the chair was correct, then the backrest has a width of 18 inches, but he was still offset a few inches. The bungee pin size wasn't listed, so I used Amazon's augmented reality to get a more accurate measurement. Now we can set up our equation. I also found the average shoe lift for men size 7 through 11 to be about 1 inch, so I'm using this photo. First, divide the circumference of the Yeti cup by 2, multiply that number by 1.618, then multiply by 2, add the hand size back on, multiply by 2 to account for both arms, add 15 to get about 61.6 inches, or about 5'1" and 3/5, and 52 inches for a short height. In turn to wingspan.
Who is the dude that can tell me how tall I am? Because I have no clue.
Now you're probably expecting me to use her water bottle or her wheelchair, but I want to take it a step further and continue testing the effectiveness of trig. Assuming from the ground to her shoulder is 36 inches, we're going to subtract half the height of her iPhone 8 Plus to set up a triangle under her arm. Since she's sitting back at an angle, we're going to let the opposite side represent from wrist to shoulder. Using my angle app, I was able to set up a 90-20-70 triangle and use tan 20 times 32.86 to find the opposite side to represent her chest size. First, divide 32.86 by square root 3 to find the opposite side of the 30-60 triangle. Next, divide that number by 2 to get her forearm length. Divide that number by 1.618 to get her hand size. Add the opposite side and her hand size together. Multiply that number by 2 to account for both arms. Next, do tan 20 times 32.86 to get her chest size. And add that number to her arm length to get about 61.63 inches, or about 5'1 1/2. but this doesn't account for muscular atrophy or any bone deterioration diseases like osteoporosis. I'll take off 3% for 5 feet.
People's heights. I wonder if he can guess people's heights when they're wearing heels.
I've been challenged by the CEO of Papaya Tutors to guess her height with minimal references, leading me to revert back to old theories. To start things off, I'm going to be using this chair. The height from the ground to the seat is 17.5 inches, so I set up this triangle where the hypotenuse represents her leg size. However, I still had to account for the heels. This U? If those shoes were correct, then those heels were about 4.5 inches, so we can subtract that from the hypotenuse to assume a 1-to-1 ratio. First, plug in 17.5 and 22.75 to get the hypotenuse. Subtract 4.5 for the heels, multiply that number by 2, add 12 for head size to be left with 60.4 inches, or about 5 feet and a half, maybe 5'1" for all the rough estimates.
Official video calling you out. I dare you to guess my height.
I decided to go with this frame of his hand wrapped around his glass. Based off the pattern on the bottom, I'm gonna assume that it's an old-fashioned 10.25 ounce whiskey glass. One factor I noticed is that his hand was slightly over half the circumference, so I'm gonna add the diameter of a quarter for the extra distance. Next, I'm gonna be using this photo as a reference for his chest size. This U? Since I know the width of the gun, I was able to set up this triangle where I was going to set the opposite side equal to his upper arm length. However, I found an app that shows angles and I was able to get a more accurate measurement using cosine. The diameter of the glass was 3.25 inches, so multiply that by pi to get the circumference. Next, divide that number by 2, add 0.75 for the diameter of the quarter to get his hand length. Multiply that number by 1.618 to get his forearm length. Multiply that number by 2, add the hand size back on. Multiply by 2 again to account for both arms. To get his chest measurement, use cosine 32 times 18.56. Add those numbers together for 65.34 inches, or about 5'5" and 3/8 inches.
I really want that guy who guesses people's height to do me.
Once again, I decided to go with the Dunkin' Donuts cup to test the accuracy of this method. Since we remembered the top diameter was 3.75 inches, we can estimate his hand size to be about half the circumference. Next, I'm going to measure the flow of the air in his room. Just kidding. But I am going to use the width of this air vent as a reference for his chest size, which is 14 inches. To justify these measurements, I went ahead and found the dimensions of his microwave online. The diameter of the inner plate was 16 inches, so the estimation of 14 inches for chest size was pretty accurate. Next, we can set the hand size equal to y and solve using our equation, this time incorporating 1.02 for all the rough estimates. First, find the diameter of the Dunkin' Donuts cup, then divide that number by 2, multiply that number by 1.618, multiply that number by 2, add y, multiply again by 2 for both arms, add 14 for chest size, and multiply by 1.02 to get 65.18 inches, or about 5'5".
What is the tag for that guy who figures out people's heights?
This was my most highly requested video with over 1,000 mentions in a night, so once again I'm going to prove that I can find the height using a hand size. First, we need to find the missing distance from the circumference of her bottle. To do that, I'm going to be using this photo of her holding ramen. The cup held 2.25 ounces of ramen, so I found a cup with similar dimensions. The distance seems to only account for half the cup, so I can divide the diameter by 2 and multiply by pi. Next, I needed to find a reference for chest size. I couldn't find the exact model, but I found one with a similar backrest, which ended up being a width of 15 inches. So we can set the hand size to y and solve with this equation. However, I'm not sure if I need 1.02 since the measurements were more precise. First, find the circumference of the coldest water bottle and subtract x. Multiply that number by 1.618. Multiply by 2 and add the hand size back on. Multiply by 2 again to account for both arms. And add 15 for chest size, which gets me to 69.89 inches, or about 5'9.5".
I want to get on this trend, so I'm curious how tall you all think I am. Especially this guy.
You guys enjoyed the coffee cup measurement, so I decided to kick it up a notch and use an apple. First, I had to determine whether the apple was large or medium so I can find the average diameter. And it seemed pretty big. His hand only covers half the apple, so we're going to be dividing the circumference by 2. Next, we needed a reference for his chest size, so I decided to use this frame. This U? I found the dimensions online, and I'm estimating the width of his chest to be the distance between these two bars. We're essentially using the same formula, but we're just working backwards to find E. First, multiply 3.75 by pi. Divide by 2 to get the hand size, multiply by 1.618 to get forearm size, multiply that number by 2, add the hand size back on, multiply by 2 again and count for both arms, add 15 for chest size, and then multiply by 1.02 to get 66.2 inches, or about 5'6". What the? Alright, so we back with another highly requested video, but I'm gonna need you guys to bear with me because I gotta talk kind of fast. It's currently like 4 a.m. and I've been working on this for a little bit over 3 hours now. Alright, so first I have to find my two references. I'm using the net and the diameter of the hoop. These are the dimensions that I used, and these are the sizes of NBA nets, and his fingers seem to be about 3 inches over the rim. Firstly, I needed to make some adjustments to my formula a bit. One being I changed plus n to minus n, and I added some total values such as h sub s. And I'll explain all of this in another video, I promise. Okay, so first I need to solve for hs. Divide hr1 by 1.618. Add these two numbers together. Multiply by 2. Add 18. And multiply by 1.02 to find hs. He's pretty tall, so I substituted the average ape index of NBA players for x. And I got this number. And subtract that number from hs to get 82.15 inches, or 6'10".